2013, I found my mom overdosing on heroin. She had gotten hooked on pain pills from blowing out her knee. She was an alcoholic my entire life. So that was 13. I married in 14. I miscarried twice in 2015. My mom died of lung cancer in 2016. I filed for divorce in January of 18. I had a full hysterectomy in October of 2018. My divorce was final at the end of November, and my brother, Justin, overdosed and died 6 days later. So to say that I've led a tumultuous life would be accurate. Like I said, that's why I prefaced it with I sound very lighthearted when I say all those things, and they were all very traumatic, and then lumped together, they created quite a bit of chaos in my life. But I've done so much work to be able to talk really comfortably about it, and lots of therapy, obviously. If you've done research and you've read enough about or listened to any other things I've done, you'll hear me say a lot regret is a useless emotion.
This episode of the Kintsugi Podcast is brought to you by Pause, Breathe, Reflect, which can help you bring mindfulness to your everyday moments. Hey there, my fellow like-hearted humans. It's Michael, and this is the Kintsugi Podcast. This week's story of connection is a special one. The person I sat down with heard my story on the Ritual podcast and decided to reach out. Not expecting a response back, but at the time, she didn't really know me all that well. My feeling is, if someone wants to take the effort to reach out, I'm going to respond to make that connection in our Kintsugi spirit. So we traded text messages. We traded a little swag. She makes some wonderful coffee. I sent her some Pause, Breathe, Reflect stuff. And I started to dive into her story. She's a curious person. She's driven. But her story also includes the pain of family addiction. And she had this aha moment that she didn't want to live life that way anymore, and has stepped into a new way of living. What I appreciate most about her story is that it's human. Her story is within your story. It's within my story. In the podcasting world, it's quite common to go after the marquee name, someone that everyone knows. They might have a best-selling book or a TED Talk that's gone viral. The thinking goes, if I bring forward someone that everyone knows, I'll attract more listeners to my podcast. And then my podcast will be uber famous and I can monetize it and all that jazz. But that's not the intent of the Kintsugi Podcast. Sure, we've had some stories of connection with people that are better known. But when you boil it all down, even the most famous person isn't really known by a great percentage of the people who share this big blue marble with us. Through Kintsugi, I wanted to share stories from real people, common people like you and me, people who have broken, who have cracked, but have found a way to come back together. And today, they're celebrating their golden symbols of strength and resilience. That's why I love my conversation with Jennifer Fox, because she's gone through a lot in her life. And then she had a moment after breaking and cracking. She found a way to come back together in our Kintsugi spirit. And she shares in our conversation so many words of wisdom that are really practical, really relatable, because this crisis we face with addiction really hits home in America and across the planet. It really is a moment to pause, breathe, reflect on how we're living and why it's driving such a problem with addiction. We have so many things. With alcohol, with drugs, gambling, work. The list can go on and on. It's a story that almost every family has to deal with. It's a story that my family has dealt with. So I'm so excited to welcome Jennifer Fox to the Kintsugi Podcast because her story is in your story. Her story is in my story. We are all connected through similar stories. So if you're ready, take a healthy breath in and a slow releasing breath out. Find a comfortable position and get to know Jennifer Fox. Hey, Jennifer. Great to see you.
Hi, good to see you too.
So for the listeners, we were just laughing before we hit record about Jennifer's email address. And so we're not going to give it out online so the whole world knows, but it's a play on your last name. And so I appreciate the humor in your email address. And if someone's really curious, as we dive into our conversation, you can probably look it up and find you.
I'm sure it's pretty easy to find. Yeah. I've had it for a very long time.
Yeah. So this is going to be a great conversation for everyone out there listening. You're going to want to share it with your friends. And we've just started, and I already know that that's going to be the case. So a little foreshadowing, if you will. All right. So here's how I always love to start our interview. How is your central nervous system doing right now?
Oh, so good. So good.
It's better than like, hey, how you doing? I'm fine.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
No, I'm like bursting with joy.
All right. Awesome. I like that. It's the first time that someone said that. So that's good.
Yeah.
I like joy. So we have a term in the mindfulness space called mudita, and that's appreciative joy. So that's basically like when you got joy going on, I feel joy for you.
So I start my day out with a gratitude practice, start and end it.
Oh, yeah.
And I started doing that in 2020, and it literally changed my life. So the sun burned through the clouds here this morning. It's supposed to storm later today and then tomorrow. So when the sun shines, I know it seems very simple, but if you write down sunshine on your gratitude list enough times, it becomes something that fills your tank, like your joy tank.
Yeah.
And I genuinely feel that much joy. And I was able to drag my dad out for a walk very early today. And that makes me happy. So yeah.
That's really cool. Are you a sunrise gal or a sunset gal?
I'm a both.
You're a both.
Can you be both?
Yeah, you can be both. I know I set that up in a very binary way, and binary things just ain't my jam. I like the gray space in between the black and white. So my apologies for everyone that is questioning my logic in setting that up as a binary. If you know me really well, I tend not to do that. But yeah, you can definitely be both.
Yeah. So from my patio, I see the sunrise.
Oh, nice.
And so I love I live in a small condo, and I can see that glow of the sunrise come through my curtains in the morning. I love that when I know it's going to be a pretty sunrise. One of the things when I do my gratitude journal, I also write down 10 manifestations. So 10 things I want to be true, in the future. I wrote for a very long time. I wrote down, I live somewhere with a view. And then one day two things happened. One, I was standing looking at this beautiful sunrise one morning and thought, well, I already live somewhere with a view. It had not dawned on me that, because in my mind, it was a view of mountains or ocean.
Sure.
And then I was driving home from my dad's house one evening right at dusk, and the sun was setting, and there's this really pretty lake that I drive by from his house. And again, I pulled my car over to watch the sunset and thought, well, damn, Jennifer, you have not been paying attention. You already live somewhere with a view. And so I stopped writing that down because I was like, well, I'm not appreciating what I have.
Yeah, it's already came to fruition, right?
Yeah,
so a condo with a view, the sequel to A Room with a View, right? So the movie. So you've upgraded from a room to a condo. So, but nature is so cool. We can just get into our nature, get outside, or even if we're looking at nature from inside our dwelling, it has a way of providing a lot of healing, which is really cool.
It sounds so hokey, and I know when I get off on this tangent, some people are like, have their eyebrows raised. But I mean, the sound of chirping birds in the morning, I love that. And the woman who watches my dog, she stays in my condo when I travel, and I was away last week. And she had said to me, I love staying at your condo, but is there anything you can do to turn off the birds? And I was like, see, this shows like what polar opposite people we are, because I wake up and hear the birds chirping and it's like a symphony, and you wake up and hear that as annoying. And so like I'll walk my dog early and around 6:30 in the morning, and like the birds will be going crazy, and I just like love that sound. But I just also got back from the Grand Canyon, so that's like the epicenter of nature.
I know. We do need to save some time to talk about that experience, but we'll put a pin in that. But yeah, I'm right there with you. Like bird song is such a great sound. And
especially when you can like find it, right? Like this morning I saw the robin who was leading it. She or he was up there so proud, and it just makes me smile.
Yeah, no, it's so wonderful. I have a big bike race coming up about 2 weeks from right now as we sit down, and we have to ride throughout the night. And so one of the things I'm really looking forward to is just paying attention to the bird song in that part of the country.
Because everything else is so quiet.
Everything is so quiet, and then you can start hearing the birds. And I begun visualizing that the birds are sort of like the fans.
I love it.
Like cheering you on, right? So like
that's cool.
One little tweet, one little chirp at a time. All right, so we're going to put your job aside. What you do to pay the bills and do your travel and the whole thing like that. How would you describe who you are?
Oh my gosh. How would I describe who I am? A work in progress, I suppose.
We all are. Yes, works in progress.
Well, I think we all should be. I'm not sure if we all are. I know a lot of people who are doing zero work.
Well, that's true. Fair point. Yeah, many people are not doing the inner work they probably should. Yeah.
Yeah. I think if you've done research and you've read enough about or listened to any other things I've done, you'll hear me say a lot like regret is a useless emotion. So I really try not to look back and wish I had, but I can look back and say like, I wonder what my life would have been if I had started this work younger. But I'm really proud of who I'm becoming. And I would say that I wasn't doing the work. I wasn't the person who was a work in progress, or at least not consciously. So it's something that you and I talked about where I said, I've done an alcohol-free year before, and that was in 2020, not too long ago. And so I have a very visceral memory of what that felt like. So for much of the beginning of this year, I've been like, why does this feel different? Why doesn't this feel like 2020? And then it just recently dawned on me like, well, it doesn't feel like 2020 because I'm not the same person that I was in 2020. I mean, I think I'm a good human who tries to do right by the people in my life. I'm incredibly flawed. The podcast is not long enough for me to name them all, but I like me. I think I'm a good person, and I try and live in a way that would inspire somebody else to maybe find more hope in their own life.
I love that. Yeah, we're all perfectly imperfect. It's sort of the spirit of the whole show.
Yeah.
The whole spirit of Kintsugi is that we all have scars and blemishes and maybe a few gray hairs or a few less hairs or...
I don't know. People ask me that all the time. I'm like, how would I know? I've been coloring it for like 30 years.
Yeah. So like for me, I'm just personally speaking, I definitely have a fewer hairs. So like, but like things, things change, and we are,
oh my gosh,
we are flawed. And in the spirit of Kintsugi, we slap gold on those scars and those blemishes, and we don't hide them. We celebrate them as symbols of our strength, symbols of resilience, and symbols that we're living a full life, or we're living a good story, which we'll talk about here in a bit. So I love it. It's like, I think we're all flawed to a certain degree. And if we can all just take a big breath in, breath out, and realize that we all are, we could connect with each other and
in such a more meaningful way, right?
Yeah. Like, nobody's got this all figured out. We're still trying to figure it out. And maybe if we can come together through different perspectives and different lived experiences and give everyone a voice, then maybe we can do a better job of figuring out.
I mean, we found each other because you were on Rich Roll's podcast. And I loved that he had you on the podcast because, with all due respect, but you're not a big name, right? So
I'm not a big name.
You're somebody that like is very relatable because you're just a guy living his life, doing his thing. And, I love his podcast and love all the episodes. But when I hear somebody like you, it's like, oh yeah, those are my people. Like I had to reach out, right? Because I'm like, those are the kinds of things and people that I'm attracted to are people that are living in a way that I am. I mean, I assume that like I do, people who expend a lot of energy trying to hide their flaws or pretend they're not there. And I have worked very hard on like myself and boundaries and all that stuff. So watching that from afar has been really interesting, right? To watch how hard people work to be somebody they're not. That seems exhausting.
Yeah, it takes a lot of effort to be someone you're not. It also takes a lot of effort to be the person that you're meant to be. And so I love the fact that you reached out. I still vaguely remember the text. You were like, I don't know if you're going to get this. I don't even think you will reply to this, but I just got to put it out there. And I was like, oh, no. Oh, we're definitely going to respond. We're going to reply. And here we are, which is really awesome. So can we go back maybe a few years, like before the pandemic? So you just alluded to the fact that you've been working on yourself almost like at the beginning of the pandemic. So I know 2020 was a different year for you than a lot of people. And the whole pandemic was many different types of years for many different types of people. But if we had to go back, a few years prior, can you bring us up to speed to some of those pivotal moments, those inflection point moments in your life that lead us to today?
I can. Yeah. I think it sometimes feels uncomfortable for the listener when I bullet point it very casually. I don't mean to be casual about it, what I'm about to say, but I do want to preface it by saying I've done a lot of work to get where I am to be able to bullet point what I'm about to say. So I don't negate the fact that all of these things had a profound impact that, got me here. But I'm going to go back even more than a couple years. And like I said, just like checklist it. My mom filed for divorce when I was a junior in high school. I was sexually assaulted twice my senior year. My 20s were kind of a shit show because of that. That's when my mom got hooked on pills. In my mid-30s, I felt very unvalidated about one of the sexual assaults, which was a family friend, a farm that I've been traveling to since I was little. I thought of this man as a grandfather. And it's a very surreal thing to have that happen to you. So I actually got in my car and drove out with a girlfriend and confronted him on his ranch, almost 20 years later. He could have told me I was Looney Tunes and get the you-know-what off my ranch. He didn't. I literally waited in my Jeep sitting on his ranch all day for him and almost left. And then he came driving down the dirt road right when we were on our way out. It was crazy. But one of the best things I ever did, and I can't tell you where that courage came from because I don't know, but it was like the healing I never knew I needed.
Yeah, so brave.
Because he cried and apologized. And he was probably close to 90 when I did that. So I've always been seeking. I've always kind of been trying to get on this path, right? And then I met my husband in 2013. When I met him, I already knew that I had fibroid issues that would probably need to be tended with. And I think I was 38 when we met. So I was later in life, had never been married, no kids, always thought that would be what my life looked like as being a wife and a mother. And I even chose my profession, my career, working for my family business, because I figured it would offer me the flexibility to be a stay-at-home mom and have an income. I'm no dummy. So anyway, when we were dating, 2013, I found my mom overdosing on heroin. She had gotten hooked on pain pills from blowing out her knee. She was an alcoholic my entire life. So that was 13. I married in 14. I miscarried twice in 2015. My mom died of lung cancer in 2016. I filed for separation in April of 2017. I filed for divorce in January of 18. I had a full hysterectomy in October of 2018, which was my fourth fibroid surgery in 5 years. And then my divorce was final at the end of November, and my brother, Justin, overdosed and died 6 days later.
Wow.
So to say that I've led a tumultuous life would be accurate. And like I said, that's why I prefaced it with like, I sound very lighthearted when I say all those things, and they were all very traumatic, and then lumped together, they created quite a bit of chaos in my life. But I've done so much work to be able to talk really comfortably about it, and lots of therapy, obviously. So 2019 was a disaster in my life. I had started doing dry January in 2015, I think it was. So I got married. He and I were very toxic together, both very unhealthy drinkers. So by the time 2019 came, I actually did dry January still that year. But then
you made up for it in February, March, and all the way through December.
Oh my God. Yeah, I was drinking like a raging alcoholic for sure.
And at that point, Jennifer, did you consider yourself an alcoholic?
No, and I still don't. So maybe I shouldn't so flippantly use that terminology. But I was drinking very abusively, for sure. And ebbed and flowed with an unhealthy relationship with alcohol throughout my 20s, 30s, and 40s, for sure. Prior to like starting therapy and really starting to like dig in to what that was. Obviously, addiction's in my family, so I'm keenly aware that it's something that my first Alateen meeting for my mom was at her first 28-day program when I was 10. So I've been around that my whole life. And then obviously my brothers. And so one of the things that like I always kind of aspired to in my imagination was running. I always wanted to be a runner, not so much because of the physical activity, but what I like had envisioned what a runner is, right? Running is hard. It takes discipline. It takes structure. I see people out there running.
It's healthy.
It's healthy, being fit. And I don't know if you've ever tried to make running easy, but there's like no way to do it. Believe me, I've tried all ways. Running is just hard. It doesn't even matter how slow you're running. Yeah, it's just hard. Like you can get on an elliptical at a gym and basically like you may as well be going backwards. You're going so slow. You can make working out in a gym very easy. There is zero way to make running easy. So I'm that person who for 20 years was like, I could never run a marathon. I have a bad back. I actually share what Rich has, spondy. I have the same thing. I've had it since gymnastics. I was a competitive gymnast. So in my mind, I just couldn't do those things, like physically couldn't do them. But then in 2019, in my infinite drunk wisdom, I bought a Peloton treadmill one night. So I woke up to the confirmation email, literally, and like, kind of cross-eyed the next morning, like scrolling my phone going, okay, I guess I'm going to be a runner now. And I could have returned it, I'm sure, right? I could have called up and been like, sorry, made that purchase on accident, cancel the order. But I don't know, something in me, I think I already knew I wasn't living in a healthy way. So I didn't cancel the order. I got the treadmill delivered, probably came in June, maybe. Never got on it. And then I saw a friend posting about like the Rachel Hollis 3-day women's conference, and that kind of intrigued me. And like social media, right? The algorithm, like you start clicking on things and then it's serving you up. And so I was doing enough of that seeking that I started running on that treadmill. I signed up for her 3-day conference in January. And then I decided that I was going to run a 5K every month until I could do that without stopping to walk because I couldn't run a mile. And so I did. I signed up for the Turkey Trot in November of 19, a New Year's Eve run. And then I registered for a bunch of races through 2020 because once I make up my mind about something, I'm like, okay, I'm in. And I was like committed. So then as the year drew closer, I'm trying to remember, like I found Rich sometime around then, or maybe right in early 2020, but I was also following pages about drinking. That's how I found his book originally. So like everything I was choosing and starting to listen to was like the next best right thing.
The algorithm, Jennifer, knew you were changing maybe before you knew you were changing.
Yeah.
You bought that tread and then you signed up for Rachel's retreat or whatever. And they're like, oh, she's making a fundamental shift.
Fresh meat.
Yes.
Yes.
We're going to send her new ads and new posts.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it worked.
I know you said you bought the tread in a drunken haze one night.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
But was there something like within you besides this notion that you always fancied yourself as a runner and wanted to be a runner? Because what you mentioned, you bullet pointed what was happening in your life since junior year, or actually going way back to when you were 10 with your mom. That's a heavy load. There's a lot of rocks in that backpack. And you could have easily went the other direction.
I know.
In 2019. Yeah. You could have said, here's my fate. My mom had an addiction problem. My brother had an addiction problem. We have addiction in our family. My health isn't great. I have a weird relationship with alcohol or an unhealthy relationship. So why bother trying to beat the family history? I'm just going to go down this more negative or darker path. What spoke to you? Was it something in your body, or is it just something in your mind? Like, what was it that said, no, I'm going to choose a different path. I'm not going to return that tread, even though it would have been easy to do so?
I think from the time I've been young, I have felt a purpose that I couldn't explain. And I felt different. Definitely different than members of my family, too. I have an older sister and 2 younger brothers, one that's passed. But nobody in my family was talking about anything, ever. You know what I mean? I really don't even think that I recognized that fully until recently.
No, I can totally relate. In my family, no one talks about what I talk about.
Oh, I can promise you, if any of my siblings have listened to the podcast I've done just over the last 2 years, they would be horrified that I'm talking about it now. Seriously. I mean, my sister wanted to tell people that my brother died in his sleep when he overdosed. And I was like, wait, what? Like, no, we're not doing that.
Acceptance is really hard, but so powerful.
Yeah. So there's been something that has been an underlying current of authenticity that's just always been me, good or bad. I mean, there's certainly some downsides to just being like, here I am. In fact, as an aside, I've been doing a little online dating. That's a podcast for another day, not for the faint of heart.
There's a whole other podcast.
Oh my God.
I'm not sure if it's Kintsugi family friendly or not. Depends on which app you're using. But that's a whole new world.
I've already paused. It was short-lived because that's just not my thing. But anyway, in doing it, I realized, people could Google me and listen to 10 podcasts I've done and know a lot of stuff that might scare you about a stranger, right? So for good or bad, I am who I am. And I've had to find a lot of trust in that in moments of doubt where I feel like I'm not just fitting in. I can't just go with the flow, no matter how much it feels like that would be easier or more comfortable. I think I also was raised with this notion that life is hard and you either sink or swim. And I was also a competitive swimmer. It was my favorite sport. I wish I'd stuck with it. So I think that kind of notion of life is hard. You're not special, right? Your story's not special. Your story's, yes, it's what I told you is super traumatic, but then there'd be somebody who could tell you a much more traumatic story. So somehow, somewhere along the line, I got that notion that it is up to you. You sink or swim. You have a choice. And so I think that was a big part of it. And then my mom's sister was in recovery when I was young, was very open about it, was recovering out loud. So I think there's a control freak part of my personality a little bit, diagnosed little OCD, definitely have some controlling tendencies. And I say that, and it sounds so bad, but in healthy ways, I guess. It's kept me with good boundaries in that way, or good guardrails, better word, guardrails.
Yeah, quoting from When Harry Met Sally, you just like it the way you like it.
I just like it the way I like it, yeah. So
that's okay.
I remember being in high school, all my friends were doing drugs, all of them, tripping, and shrooms or ecstasy weren't really a thing then, but it was acid, right? People are tripping on acid, certainly smoking weed every weekend. And I remember they'd come back to school on Monday talking about how they were high for 12 hours. And I'd be like, that sounds terrible. You were stoned.
To me, it sounds terrifying.
Yeah, 12 hours? You were out of your mind. There was nothing that sounded appealing about that. And I have to think it's because that feels like I wouldn't be in control for 12 hours. That just sounds awful. There's nothing appealing about it to this day. So I suppose I have that controlling undercurrent to think, because definitely I do often think, wow, my life could have turned out a lot differently. I could have made some really different choices. I could have easily, I was surrounded. I would not have had to look far to get it.
Yeah, you could have gone down a completely different path with everything that happened, including just the turmoil of 2019. And now we flip into 2020. We got like 2 months of like, it's a new decade, it's a new year. And then this little thing called the pandemic hits. And for so many people, it was one of the hardest periods of their lives. We had obviously great loss, great suffering. As you've alluded to, we do love to compare our trauma to everyone else's trauma. And there's such a game of status. We make trauma another part of the status game, which is just ridiculous. It's trauma. I don't think there's a small T trauma or a big T trauma. It's just trauma.
Right. And it's big T to you.
Yeah. The body doesn't know how to capitalize or lowercase letters. It's just what the body's feeling, what the mind experiences. So you come into this, you've had now a few months of walking down this different path towards, as the kids would say, the authentic Jennifer, a healthier version of you, stepping into all the things that you might have felt when you were younger, that you were a little bit different, but maybe not fully understood. So now you're taking this walk down this path. And then 2020 comes, and it's almost like the year is an accelerator for you.
Oh, it was.
For this new way of living.
It was.
Yeah. Can you share more about that?
Yeah. So when I got up on the start line for that turkey trot here, it's the big turkey trot in downtown Chicago. It's very well attended, thousands of runners. And it was Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving was always my favorite holiday. I don't like the obligatory gift giving part of Christmas. So I was like, when I was in my teens, I was making everybody go around the table and say what they were grateful for, much to their dismay. So
that's a long,
it was a long time ago, before it was a thing.
We don't remember those days. Like when we were younger, because we're like in the same ballpark age-wise. The word gratitude, I know Thanksgiving was like, the gratitude holiday, but no one I knew had a gratitude practice or would be open about like, hey, Jennifer, I'm really grateful for you, or like share things before dinner. There would be grace. You would say a prayer, maybe a form of gratitude, but going around the table saying, all right, what are you grateful for? We never did that as a family.
Well, trust me, we wouldn't have either. I mean, I made everybody and I got a lot of eye rolls. And like I said, I couldn't tell you where that came from. I'm not suggesting that I made it up. I obviously thought of it from somewhere, right? I have no idea where. Maybe I watched an Oprah.
All paths lead to Oprah.
All paths lead, yes. Well, I have a good Oprah story for you too. But anyway, so I'm on the start line of Thanksgiving, of the turkey trot on Thanksgiving. I'm a new runner, so I don't know what I'm doing. It's the most perfect day to run a 5K. It's like 55 degrees.
Oh, perfect.
And yours truly is layered like she's going to Antarctica, because I don't know what I'm doing. I literally have 2 pairs of pants on, like long underwear, and then a fleece-lined leggings, 2 pairs of socks, probably 4 layered like long underwear, my smart wool, a dry fit shirt, and then a puffer jacket, a hat, and gloves.
You're just sweating out all the toxins, right?
It's literally no wonder that I did not collapse on the course, because my average heart rate, according to my watch, was 191 beats per minute. So anyway, that was my first 5K. And it was super emotional. I got really choked up with tears because at this point, my mom is gone. My brother is gone. My family is so disjointed and I'm alone. And I'm looking at all of these seemingly, we can romanticize that all of these are perfectly normal, healthy, functioning families on a start line on Thanksgiving.
Sure. Yeah.
And then I did a New Year's Eve run. And then January and February, I was like, well, there are no 5Ks in Chicago. So I went down to San Antonio and I was just so set. Like, it might take me a really long time to get there, but once I make up my mind about something, it's like, get out of my way. So I've told the story many times, but a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, in December, when I decided that my annual Dry January was going to be Dry 2020 instead, I remember him saying, actually right behind us, we're not going to actually tell people you're quitting alcohol for the whole year, are you? And I literally had not thought about that. Like, not once did I think what I would say to people. Like, I don't live my life in a way that I feel like I need to be accountable to others, especially strangers. I think it's very strange that we live life by this set of rules that somebody we don't even know set for us, and then we just blindly follow them every day. Like, that's always felt weird to me. So I looked at him and I said, I don't know, like real casually, right? I was probably chopping something at my counter, like I was making dinner. And I'm like, I don't know. I haven't thought about it. Why? And he said, it's almost like he whispered it, like it was like, like gossiping little ladies over tea. Like, well, aren't you afraid people are going to think you have a problem? And I was like, I drink 2 bottles of wine every day. That is a problem on anyone's measure. I don't really give a shit what anybody thinks. And that was it. Like, and he just looked at me like, oh. And I remember feeling like he looked worried for me. And I've seen that look on his face many times because I am so open and honest. And like, he always thinks, aren't you worried? Like that's going to come back and bite you somehow. And I guess I'm like, maybe I have a comfort zone because I run my own business. So I can't get fired but I don't know. I just don't live my life in a way where I premeditate what are people going to think about this before I do.
Sure.
Maybe some could argue that sometimes I should, but
who knows? I think it is healthy not to be hung up on the fear of other people's opinions.
Yeah. And I mean, I think I sometimes worry. Like I read something recently that said, you can not care what people think, but you can still worry. And I thought that was really interesting because I'm like, oh, I do that. Like I do that. I don't care what people think to the degree that it keeps me from doing what I want or living in a way that I want. But then I will worry after. And so I'm very aware of that right now. And it's something that I'm really working on and trying to break. If I'm going to talk and whatever, courageously share my story, then I can't saddle myself with worry about how people receive it. As long as I'm being myself and being authentic and being honest and true, I can't worry what happens to it on the other end. Does that make sense?
Sure. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think you share your story in the way that feels genuine to you. And it's going to reach the people it's going to resonate with. And there'll be people out there that won't pick it up, won't get it, won't appreciate it. And you know what? Your story is not for them.
Right. Yeah.
And that's also really cool. So how confident were you that you could do this? I know you just said like, hey, when I make my mind up, I'm going to get after it. But not for nothing, Jennifer, 2 bottles of wine a night, you're doing a little work to drown those 2 bottles. So you're going to go from that to being dry.
Yeah.
That is a pretty big leap by all measures. So did you think like from a confidence perspective, you're like, no, I got this. I know I can do this.
Yeah. So it's weird. I don't know what to attribute this to. I think if I'm being fair, I'm sure at some point I thought like, I wonder if I'm going to be able to, I had to have, right? But I don't know. I think 2019 was my proverbial rock bottom, and it was a very comfortable rock bottom, right? Nothing terrible happened to me. I was drowning my sorrows, but a lot of that was it. It's not like I was getting in my car and recklessly driving or hanging out in bars and I'm a grown adult, right? Like I was.
Yeah, you're in your condo with a view.
Yes, I'm in my condo with a view.
And having some Chardonnay, and just.
And I run a business.
Yes.
I mean, if I work for someone else, perhaps life would have looked differently, but I had padding to protect me from any real, it never spiraled that much. 2 bottles of wine sounds, yes, it's insane every day. That's crazy. There's nothing healthy about that. But I also was pretty insulated from I wasn't living in a way that was outwardly, even my friend Jim, who I referenced, said geez, I didn't know that you were drinking that much.
Sure. Yeah, you can hide it. Yeah, I think you can hide it. And I think there's a lot of folks that maybe they don't have such a heavy habit as you did. But there's certainly a number of folks within our age group, I will just say Gen Xers, we're in the Gen X group, that will routinely throw back a few drinks a night.
Oh, yeah.
They would not consider themselves an alcoholic because that label is too far of a leap for them because they're handling it.
Right.
But there is a unhealthy relationship with alcohol.
Yes. Yeah.
They feel like they need a couple glasses. You mentioned, the company that makes your tread. I should say that Peloton and my Peloton executive coaching, because a lot of people will know that I have a company called that. 2 different companies, but
yeah,
you'll see though, leaderboard names on Peloton.
Oh, God. I ride for wine, all this.
Yeah, with a lot of references to, I work out so I can drink.
Yeah.
In essence. So I think there's plenty of people out there that have a dysfunctional relationship with alcohol.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether they care to admit it or not. So I would love for you to share, like, what was that like as you got into it? Like, what did you start to experience after you started to change your relationship with alcohol?
I was really committed. I had a group on Facebook actually where, I think there were over 300 people in that group that were also doing a dry year challenge. I don't know how many successfully completed it or not, but here's the thing. I think my commitment and why it felt so effortless was because my commitment was not about the drinking. My commitment was about changing my life. My commitment was about becoming the person that I had always dreamt about being, that I knew was in there. My commitment was to be able to look in the mirror and feel really proud of the person looking back. And so I instinctively just knew, both from firsthand experience with my family and just, it's not rocket science, right? Drinking 2 bottles of wine a day is not going to lead you to a good place. So it's like I could see, okay, alcohol is not serving me. It is not going to help me get to where I want to go. I can't be this person anymore. I feel like that 5-year span from 2013 through 2018, it finally broke me.
Sure.
And it was decades of stuff. And then that boom, 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 right in a row. It was like I never had enough time to digest and process the trauma before a new trauma came.
Sure.
And so it's like my life has been very chaotic and trauma driven and whatever. But it was like there was always enough time to like get back up, dust myself off and like, okay, I'm good again. And then those 5 years just made it impossible. So I really hit a rock bottom to the point where I thought, this is not who I want to be. And I just instinctively knew that if I didn't extract the alcohol, nothing else was going to work. I'm not going to be able to become a runner. I'm not going to be able to lose the 40 pounds. I'm not going to be able to feel joy again. All those things. I really was miserable. So it's like alcohol was just the thing. I knew. I was like, okay, dry January is not going to cut it. Like I'm going to need a little more time off the booze. And so to me, because of that little, like I said, that little bit of an OCD personality, I work very well in structured segments of time. I'm a big, like, everything starts on Monday person. It rattles me to start something like, you want me to start on a Thursday? No, not going to work. Got to start on a Monday. So to me, it was like saying a year. That felt good. It just felt good. I don't know how else to explain it. It felt like a big enough chunk of time where I wouldn't have to think about it. And I guess it didn't dawn on me that I might fail. Like it never dawned on me that I wouldn't be able to do it. So I suppose I'm super grateful that it did really feel effortless right away. And then by the time COVID hit, I cannot tell you if I had $1 for every time somebody said to me, you picked a real bad year to quit drinking. And every time I heard that, I'd say, I think I picked the best year to quit drinking because had I rolled into COVID drinking the way I was drinking in 2019, I don't know, maybe I would have drank myself to death. I'd maybe rehab. Maybe I would have recklessly gotten behind the wheel. Like, I don't know what life would have looked like had I been drinking. But I can tell you that I have a profound degree of gratitude that the universe, I believe in God, spoke to me in a way that gave me a knowing that this was what I had to do. It wasn't a choice. I had to. I knew that I just couldn't continue on the way I was living. And I was coming up on 50. I kind of quit smoking the same way too. I smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day since I was 15. I guess I didn't start out with that much of a habit, but I was smoking 2 packs a day in my 20s. And I'd smoke 2 packs a day, drink at least a 6-pack of Diet Coke, and ate a honey bun warmed up for breakfast every morning when I started working for my day.
Wow, the breakfast of champions right there.
I was the pillar of health. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's like I always said I wasn't going to smoke into my 30s. My mom was also a smoker. I grew up being told I'm a lot like her. And so I quit smoking in kind of the same way. Like, I got to quit before my 30th birthday. And so I just quit cold turkey. So 2020, I have said repeatedly, was the best year of my life. And I think once COVID came along, I don't know, my personality was well suited to just kind of be like, I don't know, whatever,
We're going to get after it. Yeah.
Yeah. In the very beginning, it gave everybody pause, right? I don't want to discount the people that were very concerned and discount like the seriousness, but something in me was pretty quickly was like, I don't know, I was already really like focused on a path and nothing was going to get in my way. So I did have to do virtual races for a couple months because everything had been canceled. But come July, like I found an in-person race in 2020 in Estes Park and I flew out there and I just started finding races. I mean, people thought I was crazy. They're like, you're flying around for 5Ks. And it's like, listen, I'm single, childless. I've got travel points. Like, yeah. And it's at the 5K. It's like, I'm on a journey. Back off. Get out of my way.
It's not the 5K. It's stepping into the person you want to be. The 5K is just a delivery system.
Yeah.
All right. Let's take a break. Take a full breath in and a slow releasing breath out. And relax the body as you soak up our conversation. I hope that felt good. Okay, now that we're a little bit more relaxed, can we be real? I think our morning routines, well, they've gotten a little out of control. You might not have time in the morning to meditate because you're busy doing other things like trying to get to work or getting the kids off to school. And this is where my app, Pause, Breathe, Reflect, comes in because I built it for busy people with a whole bunch of shorter practices. So if you don't have 10 minutes in the morning to meditate, cool beans. You're human after all. But I bet you have 5 times throughout the day when you have 2 minutes to practice and let go of stress and bring mindfulness to your everyday moments. So today, download Pause, Breathe, Reflect for free and begin to stress less, sleep better, and join a community of like-hearted humans rippling something worth rippling into the world. All right, let's go back to our conversation and celebrate the Kintsugi within us all. There's so much that I love about your story, Jennifer. Just out of curiosity, before I share that though, as a runner, do you know what a negative split is?
Yes. Yeah.
So in so many ways, you're setting yourself up for your whole life to run a negative split. For those that don't know what a negative split happens to be, so in running or like any type of endurance event, but mainly attributed to running, it means that the second half of the race, you're running faster, or I would say in your case, Jennifer, you're living it more awake, fuller, with more gratitude than the first half.
Oh my God, no doubt.
We are a family of, negative splits. And so we love
I love that.
negative split stories. And we also obviously love Kintsugi stories. And that's what I love about your stories. Like all the different experiences you went through, your pottery broke. It was shattered. And you made a determination in 2019 and then into the pandemic to say, we are going to come back together. We're going to connect and we're going to start healing. And the glue, the lacquer that brings the pottery back together is called urishi. And part of your urishi was, okay, I'm going to remove the alcohol because that's going to make the glue stick better. So that was taking it out. Then you start your running and all that jazz. I also assume that you start hanging out with different people.
I was just going to say that.
Because your story is a little bit of what I hear is you're sort of a lone wolf, maybe, like you're different, like doing it on your own. We're going to make this happen by myself and like I'm going to do it, right? Because there's chaos in all aspects of your life, many aspects of your life. And you had to figure out a way to like navigate that almost solo. And now you step into this new identity. I'm certain that you start hanging out with other people. I would call that your Peloton to pull in a cycling reference. But can you talk about like how that aspect of your life changed?
Yeah, it's interesting because I really haven't thought about it this way until this conversation. But I think COVID also fundamentally changed. I mean, it fundamentally changed all of us, right? But because we were all separated from each other, we weren't spending time together. So I wasn't seeing all of the friends that I came into 2020 with, many of them took COVID much more seriously than I did. And so it kind of happened by default. And I mean, no disrespect to the friends that I had going into 2020. They're all wonderful women in their own way. But I do look back at the friends I was keeping and I thought, no wonder I was very comfortably stuck, because I wasn't surrounding myself with people who were doing anything inspiring or exciting with their own lives. So I didn't have anybody modeling the behavior I was wanting in my imagination. So COVID forced that, right? I mean, all the traveling I did in 2020, I did pretty much alone. There were a couple places like the Estes Park. I have friends in Denver. They came and met me. An old friend of my brother Justin's from college. My brother Justin, who's the one that's passed away, she lives in Fort Collins. So she came to Estes Park. That was the first time I had met her. So it was like I started picking up other people. And then the Facebook group, I shared and did a lot of writing there for the people in the community. And I made a lot of like virtual friends because of COVID. And then the Heron Project. I started fundraising and running races for them. I had all of those teammates. And so I wasn't seeing any of these people in person, but I was following all of them and watching how they all live their lives. And I mean, like I said, just now I'm thinking, like I started watching people live in a way that I was not witnessing in my real life here. I wasn't surrounded by people in my life here that were living in that way. So I started meeting them other places. And even today, the majority of the people that I would say are closest to me don't live here. So we make efforts to see each other somehow. If nothing else, this is great, right? Like video chats and voice messages and all that good stuff. But I'm so grateful that I was able to look beyond my comfort zone and I've lived in Chicago my whole life. I've been here 50 years. I have a family. I have friends. I have routine. I have all those things. And COVID broke that wide open and gave me the ability to build something new. So like when I say 2020 was the best year of my life, I am not being dramatic in any way. It fundamentally changed me to the core. And, I still had a business to run. We were deemed essential. I run a vending business. We never closed a single day. I had to furlough all of my employees, manage there was a lot of stress and newness to that. I've never done that. Nobody's ever been through what we went through. But somehow, 90% of my customers did close their doors. So while it was stressful, it was only 10% of my customers open. So the stress was there, but I still had so much peace and quiet and time for myself and time to develop a really healthy, morning routine, the gratitude practice, reading, listening to podcasts. I just started reaching for new and different. Give me new, give me different, give me new, give me different. And then when things opened back up, I kept living my life the way I always did. I just didn't drink. So I just got non-alcoholic beer or whatever. I got to tell you, saying oh no, I don't drink. Do you have any mocktails? Or that started to feel like a superpower.
Sure.
I felt like such a badass when people would look at me and be like, you gave up drinking for the whole year? And especially because people knew me as a drinker too. So it was astounding to them that I was doing that. I don't understand what the big deal is.
This is just what I do now. I'm stepping into a new reality, a new identity. And it can be intimidating for some and really inspiring for others. And now it becomes a little bit more commonplace because restaurants have some non-alcoholic options now in the menu, which is really cool. But I love the fact that you can appreciate the fact that you want to surround yourself by people who are bringing out the best in you. That strong Peloton, right? You're stepping into new communities, you're connecting with new content. You mentioned podcasts, books, what have you. And really the research from Harvard around longitudinal happiness and Dan Buettner's work with Blue Zones, they both point to the importance of community as we age as it relates to our happiness. So you've moved from one friend group that you appreciate and love in a different way that helped you get to this point, and now stepping into a new friend group that is helping you level up.
Well, and I'll be honest, there was a grieving process.
Sure.
And a lot of therapy. My last therapist, Meredith, passed away very unexpectedly last year. But in one of our sessions, I will never forget her saying, you don't just have bad boundaries, you have no boundaries. She's like, I'm not even sure you know what the word means. So that was very foreign and it felt very sad. And I would argue even still sometimes can feel sad that a couple of these women aren't my friends anymore. But I also have to I spend a lot of time in the pause now, and I have to just recognize it for what I just said it is, which is I do love them very much, and they were wonderful to me in many, many ways. They all stepped up and showed up when Justin died. I was a train wreck. But they also stood by and watched me live in a really unhealthy, dysfunctional way too. And I'm a grown woman, so I don't mean it was their responsibility. But I just recognize we were all kind of comfortably living our lives, not doing anything very significant in any direction.
Yeah, comfortable in a little bit of the dysfunction as far as...
In a very sedentary, right? Like just a sedentary lifestyle.
And what we're comfortable talking about. So it could be they were more comfortable showing up for you when Justin passed away.
When I was broken.
But not comfortable talking to you about, hey, Jennifer, can we talk to you about your relationship with alcohol? So people show up for a lot of different reasons and don't show up for a lot of different reasons. I've experienced that through my lifetime. And the thing you hear on the internet is some relationships last a lifetime, some for a season and some for a reason. It's makes for a really nice, cute Instagram post.
Yeah.
But for those relationships that don't last a lifetime, they last for a season or a reason, and you no longer have them, there is a grieving process with those relationships. For some, it's maybe a couple hours. For some, it could be several years. So to just be somewhat flippant about, oh yeah, that was just, they were there for a reason or there for a season. Okay, now I'm moving on. I don't know how close to reality that is. I think we're meant to connect with each other. And when we lose a connection for whatever reason there is, there's a loss there, and we have to, or at least we get to, reconcile that. And if we choose not to, it's still with us until we want to do the reconciliation and go through the grieving process, because that relationship has shaped us in some form or fashion. And that relationship is still with us today, even as we move forward.
Well, when you earlier said you don't like the binary and you like the gray, I've always been a very binary black and white person that's working on moving into the gray. So, because I recognize that hasn't served me, right? Being so rigid about things isn't helpful. And so I'm really enjoying quite a lot working on that part of my personality and just sitting with things and not being so reactionary. And kind of the word surrender comes to mind. I just finished reading Michael Singer's 3 books. Have you read them?
Yeah.
The Untethered Soul. And yeah. So I actually got a bracelet with the word surrender on it.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I really am working on that. I love that idea of just going with the flow and tuning into the universe and surrendering instead of being so trying to always control, to keep things black and white. It is this or this, and just being comfortable in that gray. And it's been very freeing, I have to say.
I imagine it has been, although I'm going to give you credit, not easy, right?
No.
So when we've been gripping the steering wheel of life.
Well, you have to have a lot of self-awareness to be able to
Yeah, with white knuckles, it's hard to let go. We feel the car is going to get out of control.
Yeah.
But if we can just ease our grip a bit and allow life to unfold, and for us to know that we've got it, however it unfolds, we can flow with it. And so we grip tightly because we're worried that we don't know if we can handle what's going to come next. And so from a rigidity perspective, it can hinder us. But I also want to give your rigid stance a little credit because it helps you in this way. It helps create structure for you
that I need.
So you can get after that healthy game plan, that healing process. So in one way, you can surrender and let go a bit, ease your grip. But in another way, being rigid has helped you, find this pathway forward as far as here's what I'm going to do. And so the word can be used in a lot of different ways. So yeah.
I was just going to say, I've learned how to control it.
Yeah, part of surrender is not, for those that may think surrender and think it's about giving up. It's really more about accepting what is.
Yes.
And that is an essential ingredient to mindfulness, to say, hey, I'm no longer going to argue with reality. This was something that was hard for me to do back before my accident because I was trying to control things because I wanted to go just ever so perfectly, whatever perfect is.
Mm-hmm.
But I learned while I was in the hospital that Mother Nature, the universe, and God, whoever fills up your mug, they win 100% of their arguments. Reality always wins. So if I could just accept, hey, it's like this, and then so that space, then decide, okay, how am I going to move forward? I felt, at least for me, in my experience, and everyone's different, that made life a little bit easier to be able to go with the flow.
I certainly am sure you would agree. I know a lot of people who have a breathtaking lack of self-awareness. It requires a lot of self-awareness to even get to the point where you can then decide when you're going to surrender and when not, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So it's my awareness. I feel really dialed in. I'm becoming much more aware of my core values, my non-negotiables, things that are just innate in my personality that I just have to accept, right? And then getting to know those things so I know when I'm surrendering or being flexible to my detriment. So to give you an example, there was a situation last fall where I was in Atlanta for an event. I had not rented my own car, so I was at the mercy of somebody else, of other people. Not good for me. And it was like, why rent a car? Everyone else is, that was just kind of the theme. Well, you don't need a car because everyone else can have a car, blah, blah, blah. Just jump in the car with us. And I thought, oh, yeah. And then it ended up causing problems at the end when we had to get to the airport. I'm a 2-hour early girl, okay? I will sit in the airport and I will people watch. I had people watch for 3 hours. You will never catch me ever running through an airport. I am a grown-ass woman. I don't miss flights, okay? I look at that and think, what grown adult is missing a flight? That's crazy to me.
Yes.
So anyway, that situation really prompted a lot of growth, a lot of working through what had happened and why I reacted the way I did and all the things. And I just thought, Jennifer, there are certain things about your personality that are okay. And you just need to work with them. 2 things I should have done. A, I should have either rented my own damn car, or when it was time to leave for the airport, I should have called a Lyft to go to the airport. And then when my girlfriend didn't want to leave at that time because she is the run to the gate, be the last person to board and perfectly happy in that area of, both things can be okay. And instead, I tried to control her and who she is. Anyway, it ended up not a good situation. And I learned a lot from it, which was just, there are some things that are me and I am finding security in those things, like confidence and security, instead of feeling insecure about who I am all the time, thinking, no, this is okay. And it's okay that she's that way as well. Both are okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can I offer up some perspectives?
Absolutely.
Maybe real life podcasting coaching?
Yeah, please.
All right. So you don't have to shit on yourself.
I know. That goes through my head a lot.
I know. So there's a meditation on my app about stop shitting on yourself. So those are all experiences and you learned. And I know as someone, my fellow human, who is also caring for a parent, you and I have a few years of work in front of us to get comfortable with being open to help, because we're going to get to an age, whatever that may be.
Stop it.
We're going to need it. People are going to have to help us. And we have to get good at asking for help and receiving help.
Yeah. Point taken.
I say that for myself and also for you. So
I'll tell you, I do a lot of inner dialogue. My therapist looked at me pretty early on and she was like, does your brain ever turn off? And I said, nope, I don't think so.
I don't think anyone's brain ever turns off unless we're comatose.
I just am constantly going, thinking, consuming, stressing, all the things. And one of the things I did that really helped this year, actually, I'm doing another alcohol-free challenge this year, but every month I'm trying to take something away or add something to my life just for a month, something different. So February, March, I decided no earbuds. I stopped wearing earbuds because I started to realize that I am never without someone else's voice in my head. Ever. Never. Walk my dog, from my door to the car, from my door to be picked up, shopping. I always have earbuds in, and I'm always listening to a book or a podcast or music. Always. Most often book or podcast. And so I thought, I'm going to not wear AirPods for an entire month and see what that's like. And I have to tell you, I have not gone back.
Very cool. Yeah.
Because the silence, the beauty of just hearing the birds chirp, there's a lot of value in that. And I don't think we all really appreciate how much we're dialed in and connected to outside voices and stories. And I think if you, whatever it is that's your thing, whether it's AirPods or what, disconnecting from that and not always having noise, like being in my condo and not having noise in my head and just being alone with my own thoughts has quieted that constant churning so much because it doesn't feel stressful anymore. I feel very at ease.
Yeah, at peace. I like that. I don't want to freak people out with the next thing I say, but I will also say that as we talk right now, I have AirPods in, although I try not to wear them. I'm only doing it because we're recording this podcast.
And I have headphones on.
But in general, I try not to wear them. I do think in about 30 to 40 years, we'll have a hearing issue epidemic on our hands.
Yeah.
Because so many people have always something in their ears, right? Earpods or AirBods or AirPods or whatever we call them. Our ears are being bombarded with noise with a lot of proximity. So we might lose the 5 listeners we have on the Kintsugi podcast here because they might be listening to us with AirPods right now.
I know it's terrible because I still listen to podcasts, but I just put it on a speaker in my house. And then when I leave my condo, what I would do is put AirPods in. Like I was never without it. I never took a break.
Yeah, I think we have a growing issue that we're not really, maybe we're aware of, maybe we're not aware, but I think in 30, 40 years, as our generation and the generations that follow get to 60, 70, 80, I do think it's having a detrimental impact on our hearing. And I think it's accelerated the normal hearing loss that one might experience in life. I think we're going to have a little bit of a problem on our hands. So that's a public service announcement to freak everyone out and listen to the Kintsugi podcast, maybe in your car or without AirPods and all that good stuff like that. So I want to finish up here because we could talk like all day long, Jennifer.
I know. I feel like we haven't even scratched the surface.
We haven't so maybe we'll do round 2. But what's really cool about this connected world, I know, like we mentioned earlier, that we sort of got connected through Rich Roll and Rich Roll's podcast. But there's another guy, Dan Carity.
Oh, yeah.
Who I had on the podcast, and I was on his, and you were on his. And so I met Dan through a client where I did some speaking for his company, and he was at a soccer match, their girls play on the same team. And what I love about it is just like how connected we are. So it wasn't just Rich Roll. I think we would have found each other.
Well, you've said that we're Facebook friends.
Yeah, I think we were Facebook friends through a Rich Roll Facebook community. But I think when you look at Dan, because Dan lives only 25 minutes away from me, like we would have found each other because I think...
Well, and I did his podcast in person. Do you even know? Yeah, like our story, he ran a race with me. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was very cool. But I want to talk about dragonflies. So tell me about the significance of dragonflies in your life, because you have a necklace of a dragonfly.
I do. My wedding diamonds repurposed.
Yeah, so tell me about like the work you're doing now as it relates to dragonflies, and we're going to weave in Team Heron, and we're like to live a good story and just the work you're trying to do to honor your brother. So that's a huge question to end with, but I was hoping you could share more about the current work and the beautiful ripple you're putting into the world, because I see it as your pottery breaking and another aspect of your healing, to take that really bad moment, which was much longer than a moment, it was a number of years, but turning it into something that is helping the world become just a little bit better.
Thank you for saying that. I don't remember if we were recording yet or not when you asked me like what my purpose for life is, or I don't know how you worded it, but I really do all of this stuff in the hopes that there is purpose to my pain. I feel really strongly about taking what's happened to me, and because I feel very comfortable talking about my life and everything that's happened, good and bad, that somebody will listen and it might inspire them to do something with their own life and where they're at. And so I think like everything we just talked about, AirPods, the noise in our head, all that stuff, it's like living with intention. We are as connected as ever. And I think that there's actually a lot of downside to that. Like I see it in my own business. I get 200 emails a day. It's insane, right? And you could like email somebody 20 times that would have been solved in a 3-minute phone conversation. So in many ways, I think our connectivity is a detriment, but it's an opportunity to be really positive. And so I feel like the choices I've made have been the positive. Every time I've reached out to somebody randomly, and I do it a lot, they've just like reaching out to you. Dan Carity, he shared his year's sobriety anniversary with my Dragonolia community, and that's how I connected with him. So Dragonolia is my little side hustle. It's the community that I have online for people in recovery who are recovering out loud to share their stories, to hopefully inspire other people that are struggling, and also to help the people like me, like the family members who are struggling with somebody, because it's a very lonely place to have an addict in your family and to be dealing with addiction. And it feels very lonely because unless somebody's actually lived that experience, you really couldn't understand. So on the day we buried Justin, his partner Mary, who is the one that found him originally, and my cousin Mandy and I were in the car driving to the wake, the luncheon after the cemetery. I overheard Mary talking to Mandy about dragonflies and how apparently my brother Justin had met somebody in his last stint in rehab earlier that year who had introduced him to the spiritual beliefs behind the dragonfly and that their ancestors coming back. And so he went out to write in his journal that day and apparently was surrounded by a swarm of dragonflies. And so he always believed that they were our mom. So he went and got a dragonfly tattoo. And I will tell you that there is a little part of me, because I did identify Justin in the hospital. So I did see him intubated and gone in the ER. And there's a little part of me that wishes I had known that, because I never saw the dragonfly tattoo. So I have no idea what it looked like. But he had other tattoos. So that's where the dragonfly part of it comes from. And then the Nolia part of the name is actually for the magnolia tree that I used to sit under with my mom growing up. I have a lot of dark, painful, ugly memories of my mom, especially through my 20s. And she would always call me to tell me when the magnolia tree was in bloom because she knew I loved it. And I would drive home from the city and sit underneath it with her and sometimes have a drink, sometimes have a cup of coffee, depending on the time of day. And those were always really fond memories, so much so that I was actually going to name a daughter Nolia, Nolia, if I ever had a child. So it's too long of an offshoot to say where Dragonolia came from. I'll tell you, it was divine intervention, because I really don't know where it came from. It just came to me one day, like out of nowhere. This word just popped into my mind, and I don't know how else to explain it other than I just kept doing the next thing until it became something. And so I sell coffee for a living. So we do sell coffee, and $1 from every bag goes back to Heron Project in Justin's name, so people who can't afford to get treatment can get assistance. So that felt meaningful and straightforward, right? And obvious and logical, because their treatment is expensive and a lot of people don't get help because they literally can't afford it. Heron Project is doing amazing work for people in the recovery community. I really believe in their mission and the people behind it. So that felt easy, but it didn't feel like what it was meant to be. And so Dragonolia on Instagram is just a storytelling community. I have a lot of respect for people who recover out loud. And I have a beef with the anonymous part of AA. Don't come at me, all you AAers, please. I understand it's helped a lot of people, and a lot of people, including our friend Rich Roll, swear by it. But I do believe that that word anonymous, I think misinterpreted by people who aren't in recovery, is tied to shame. And I have watched it in my own life with my own family members, that the shame keeps people on this addiction spiral, because the shame leads to wanting to numb your feelings and the nuts. So for whatever reason, I feel very comfortable talking about my story, my relationship with alcohol, my struggles, the fact that I don't identify as an alcoholic at all. And I feel really strongly about recovering out loud, or living out loud in my case, so that people who don't have that comfort and do feel that shame, whatever it is, not just even about alcohol, just about anything, that maybe my comfort in talking out loud gives them comfort to make changes. Like, I cannot tell you the number of people that have DM'd me to say, because of you, I gave up alcohol. Because of you, I quit drinking. Because of you, I told my husband that I was sexually assaulted as a child. I've never told anybody that my childhood dentist did that to me. And when you shared openly on Facebook about the fact that you've been sexually assaulted, it gave me the courage to tell my husband. I have a woman in my Zero Proof project right now who, at the beginning of the year, had not told her husband she had signed on to do a year-long alcohol-free challenge because he didn't know how much she was drinking. And so she didn't feel comfortable telling him. And now it's like game changer for her. And we're only in May. Like, I can't wait to see how she blossoms throughout the year. So I think Dragonolia to me means a lot, because it gives people a place that that shame, man, it's such a killer. Like, it eats away at people. And if you could live your life with more intentionality and less shame, I feel like we'd all be much better off, much happier, much more at peace with ourselves and with each other. And so that's where the dragonfly comes in. And that's where, and yeah, there's a wait. Oh, you don't see it. There's a dragonfly on the wall right outside of camera view. But I've got dragonflies. In fact, my living brother said to me, kind of jokingly, he gave me the one that's up on the wall behind me. He jokingly said to me, all right, now I'm giving this to you, but you're not going to become like Aunt Pat was with the camels, are you? Because I don't know if it's still a symbol for like the Alcoholic Anonymous community, but back in the day, the camel was the thing, and my Aunt Pat had camels everywhere.
I didn't know that. So no, but dragonflies. Well, one, thanks for sharing the story behind it. I didn't fully appreciate the spiritual meaning of dragonflies, but I think they're absolutely gorgeous. And I will say, as a consumer of your coffee's excellent. So
thank you.
People should check it out. I'm going to put all the ways to connect with you, Jennifer, because it's a podcast in the show notes, because that's what
that's what we do.
Podcast hosts do. But I really want to underscore just how you've taken the early part of your life. We mentioned the negative splits a few minutes ago.
I love that, because I don't negative split anything else, by the way, Michael. So I'll take life.
So my hunch is that you go out really hard at the gun, and you're just like, we're going to hang on to the finish line.
I'm getting better.
But just that notion of like what you've been through in the first half of life. And so again, going back to the spirit of Kintsugi, the cracks and the breaks and all that. And now you find yourself in a position where you're doing your inner work. You're working on yourself so you can connect with yourself to heal. And to go one step further, you're also trying to help others. And there's a lot of different ways to heal, right? Some people want to do it, say, through AA, right? And so you mentioned like no shame to AA, it's helped so many people. And there's also, for some people, the way they're going to heal is going to be out loud and dealing with it. And so I love that.
I feel this sense of urgency since I turned 50 that's palpable. It's been very unexpected. I love birthdays, and I don't have a hang up about my age. I'm quite proud, and I think older and wiser, baby, right? So
yeah, it's a great decade. You're going to have fun in this decade.
Yeah.
I'm a few years into the decade. I'm just going to say you're going to have a pretty dang good time in this decade.
I am excited about it, and I feel a sense of urgency with time, and that like I'm very aware, like I don't want to waste any more time. And I can look back, and like I said, no regrets, but I look back and think, okay, now it's for real. Like, this isn't the warm up anymore. Like, this is the real deal. And so like we talked about, I just got back from the Grand Canyon, and last weekend, two of my friends, one did 100-miler, the other did the Ironman Chattanooga. Like, the people I'm surrounded by now are living in such a big way that what I'm doing doesn't feel special at all. It's just, I'm just another one of them.
It's special.
But that in and of itself is so special, right? Like I'm living in a way and I'm surrounding myself with people that live with such intention. I could tell you 25 more stories. I want to share one because it was an eye opener. I do a women's wellness retreat at the beginning of the year. I did the 2020 Rachel Hollis thing, and then that was no longer. So I found one last year. Coach Chris's partner, Emily, actually, she puts one on. It's awesome. I had a great time last year, so I went again this year. Went in a couple days early because Zach from Live a Great Story lives there and my cousin Mandy. So I wanted to do some stuff before the retreat started. And I was at a resort that was about 30 minutes away from the event space where the retreat was going to be all day, every day, and from the hotel where everyone else was staying. And I almost moved hotels, but I was staying in a really lovely resort. And I'm not even sure why, but they had upgraded me to like this beautiful suite. So I kind of thought, I don't know, I may as well just stay. I'm unpacked. And well, I touched on some pretty raw emotional stuff at this retreat run one day. Part of what felt very triggering, I hate that word so much, but part of what kind of sent me into a little bit of an unraveling was that there was wine at dinner that night. And being around alcohol does not bother me in any way, but a message had been put out very specifically saying that a decision had been made that there was going to be no alcohol at the event. So for whatever reason, the fact that there was just kind of rattled me. And there was several other things that by the time I was driving home, I felt really emotional. And I had 30 minutes in the car. And it was the very first time in my entire life that I was like so cognitively like just aware that, oh my gosh, if I was drinking right now, I would be going straight to the resort bar. Because I never consciously felt like I was numbing feelings with drinking. I assumed like, well, that must be what I'm doing. But I never consciously thought I was doing it. I was never like reaching for alcohol to like get hammered so I found that like, wow, for 30 minutes, I had to sit with that and think, not like an urge, like I thought I would go to the resort bar. I was never worried about that, but it was just being so aware that that was what my body was saying I wanted to do. I thought, oh, wow. And so it felt really good to have that awareness for the first time. And then, it was a great experience. But at the beginning of this year, of this new alcohol-free year, it feels so different because I'm such a different person than the person that did it for the first time in 2020. And I feel like I'm down to like deeper layers this time. And it's been really powerful. It's been awesome. So even the Grand Canyon, like I did rim to rim in September of last year. And then I just did rim to rim last Friday, night and day experiences as well.
Yeah. There's a saying, the same person doesn't step in the same river twice.
Yes. I'm living that right now.
Because the river's always changing and the person's always changing. And I think that's a good spot to wrap things up. It was awesome to connect. I'm so glad we did this. And as I mentioned earlier, Jennifer, your story is the Kintsugi story, right? It's, like us, we're normal people trying to figure it all out. We're going to go through things. Some of those things are really difficult and we break and we crack. And then
we have a choice.
We can go down a darker path that no one's going to judge us for because, hey, life is hard. Or you can choose to go down a path that's healing, regenerative, but just the growth. And I love that about your story and how you're taking something that was so painful in your life, your family's relationship with drugs and alcohol and addiction, and making a difference in the world. So
I appreciate you too.
I appreciate you. So thanks for coming on and being connected.
Yes. And we will meet in person one day for sure.
Absolutely.
I've been known to jump on a plane and travel. Just ask Dan. So.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Jennifer. Wow. What a story. I just love Jennifer's courage and grit, resilience, how she endures and perseveres, and how she took a low moment, almost like it was her last bad day, now has turned it into something that's putting a beautiful ripple into the world. That's what we're talking about when we talk about Kintsugi. Yes, we might break, we might crack, but we can come back together. And when we do, we come back into a different form of beauty. We celebrate our golden symbols of strength and resilience. That allows us, that affords us to put a different type of ripple into the world. A ripple that will create the world that we wish to see. And I love how Jennifer is showing up. And I hope our conversation resonated with you. And if you took anything away, I would love to hear a little bit more about what you're taking away from our conversation. So Jennifer, thank you for joining me here on the Kintsugi Podcast and representing our Kintsugi spirit. I also want to thank you for listening because I know time is your most precious resource, and the fact that you carved out some of your day to listen to our conversation means a lot to me. I am grateful for you. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to the like-hearted humans at SaaSpod that make the Kintsugi Podcast sound so great and help it ripple into all corners of this big blue marble that we all share. And now, I want to thank you for listening and supporting the Kintsugi Podcast. And if you want to go above and beyond in your support, I could certainly use a kind rating, a review, subscribing, or sharing, because it does something to the algorithm that I don't completely understand. But when you engage in this way, it helps others find our like-hearted community. If you've already done so, thank you for the extra support. And if you haven't done so yet, today might be a really good day to do so. And if you'd like to receive some additional resources that can help you connect with yourself and others, like my Better Life workbook and the inspirational text messages I send throughout the week, and of course, our Pause, Breathe, Reflect meditation app, I'll put those links in our show notes. And remember, between now and next week's story of connection, when you have a challenging moment, slow down, come back to your breath, and know that you've got this and we've got you. And together, we will ripple something worth rippling into the world. I love you for listening, and I hope to see you next week. Until then, toodaloo.